Some lessons in life do not arrive gently. They don't whisper. They don't guide you softly toward wisdom. They drag you by the throat, slam you into reality, and force you to see the world without its comforting illusions. One day, you realize the world isn't shaped for your softness, your empathy, your purity of intention. It's shaped for competition, for dominance, for those who take instead of wait, who speak instead of hesitate, who choose themselves while others beg for permission. And slowly, you begin to understand the truth that no one wanted to admit out loud. Life will break you if you approach it gently. It will break you if you try to save everyone. It will break you if you allow people to drain you. It will break you if you live without boundaries. It will break you if you hand out your loyalty to those who have never earned it. Because the world isn't built for the emotionally unarmored. The generous get exploited. The patient get ignored. The forgiving get used. The calm get walked over. The loyal get replaced by someone less loyal but more ruthless. And it's in this realization, this brutal, disorienting moment, that something inside you shifts. Not into cruelty, not into hardness, not into coldness, but into clarity. You begin to recognize that ruthlessness isn't brutality, it's precision. It's choosing where your energy goes. It's refusing to bleed for people who never intended to heal you. It's understanding that softness must be protected, or it becomes weakness. The world doesn't ask you to stop being kind. It asks you to stop sacrificing yourself to prove that kindness. You start to feel the edge forming inside you, not jagged, not cruel, but sharp enough to cut through illusion, sharp enough to protect what is sacred, sharp enough to differentiate between who deserves access to your soul and who deserves distance. And once this shift begins, once you feel that ruthless clarity awaken, you will never return to the version of yourself that allowed destruction disguised as love. Because you finally see the truth. The world doesn't break the ruthless. It respects them. Stay with me, because what comes next is the part no one tells you. The psychology behind this transformation, the inner awakening that forces you to rise above the world instead of collapsing beneath it. And if you're ready to become someone the world can no longer break, then keep watching. And if the voice inside you whispered even once, "This feels like me," then you belong here. Subscribe to Soulless so you never walk this path alone. Provinces during your softness. You don't realize the cost of softness until the world makes you pay for it. Not once, not twice, but over and over until the lesson begins carving itself into the deepest parts of your psyche. You start innocent, open-hearted, willing to believe the good in people, willing to give chances because you want to see the best in others, willing to forgive quickly because you think harmony equals love, willing to put others first because you were taught that selflessness is the highest form of goodness. But the world you entered plays by different rules. Softness doesn't attract kindness. It attracts opportunists. It attracts emotional parasites. It attracts those who take advantage of anyone who doesn't know how to say no, who doesn't know how to draw a line, who doesn't know how to protect themselves. Slowly, painfully, you start to see the pattern. Your generosity becomes an open invitation for people to take without giving. Your patience becomes permission for people to disrespect your time. Your empathy becomes a landing zone for people to unload their chaos. Your loyalty becomes a leash for people to keep you around only when it benefits them. You were taught that softness was a virtue, but in the real world, softness without boundaries becomes a trap. You try to fix people who never asked to be fixed. You try to carry people who never intended to walk on their own. You try to heal people who benefit from staying broken. You try to love people who only understand love when it hurts someone else. And every time you give a piece of yourself away, something inside you cracks. Something tiny, almost invisible at first, but over time, those cracks become fractures, and those fractures become wounds that never seem to fully close. Until one day, you look at yourself and don't recognize the person you've become. Not because you changed, but because you've been drained by everyone you allowed to take from you. Your energy is gone. Your optimism is gone. Your joy is gone. Your trust is gone. This is the moment when the world finally shows you what your softness has cost you. But it goes deeper than exhaustion. It begins reshaping the way you relate to people. You start over-explaining yourself to avoid being misunderstood. You start apologizing for the smallest things. You start suppressing your emotions to keep the peace. You start pretending you don't care when you care too much. You start accepting treatment you would never tell a loved one to accept. Your softness begins mutating into self-erasure. You shrink yourself so others feel big. You silence yourself so others feel comfortable. You betray yourself so others don't abandon you. This is the brutality soft people experience. Not physical brutality, emotional brutality. Energetic brutality, the brutality of being drained before you even realize what's happening. And then, the world hits you with the truth that finally breaks something open inside. Soft people are not rewarded, they are consumed. You learn this lesson in relationships first. The person you give everything to gives you the bare minimum in return. The person you trust betrays you without hesitation. The person you support disappears when you need help. The person you defend turns around and blames you. The person you love uses your love as leverage. And even then, you hold on. Because soft hearts don't know how to walk away quickly. You hope they change. You hope they understand. You hope your patience inspires growth. You hope your compassion is enough to soften their hardness. But what actually happens is you teach them how to treat you. They learn that you will stay even when they hurt you. They learn that you will forgive even when they don't deserve it. They learn that you will give even when you have nothing left. Softness becomes permission for others to show their worst selves. And once you learn that, your worldview collapses. This collapse doesn't make you bitter, not at first. It makes you confused. You start asking questions in the quiet of your mind. Why do people treat me this way? Why is my goodness invisible? Why do I attract those who drain me? Why do I keep giving chances? Why does no one show up for me the way I show up for them? You search for answers in self-help books, in late-night overthinking, in emotional spirals that leave you numb and heavy. But the truth isn't intellectual. It's psychological. Soft people are targeted because the world can sense who won't fight back. Predators don't choose the strongest prey. They choose the easiest. Your softness made you easy to break. Not because you were weak, but because you were unprotected. Then something shifts, slowly, quietly, almost imperceptibly at first. You begin to feel anger, not destructive anger, but clarifying anger. The anger of realizing you were never treated with the love you deserved. The anger of seeing how much of yourself you gave away. The anger of understanding your heart was never the problem. The anger that awakens when self-respect finally returns home. This anger doesn't harden you. It wakes you. It pulls you out of the fog. It removes the blindfold. It reconnects you to the instinct you ignored for far too long. And in that awakening, you begin to understand that the world doesn't reward softness unless it is paired with strength. A soft heart without a sharp mind becomes prey. A gentle spirit without a firm boundary becomes exhausted. A forgiving nature without discernment becomes wounded. This realization is the doorway to ruthlessness. Not cruelty, not violence, but ruthless self-protection. Ruthlessness is the part of you that refuses to bleed for people who wouldn't bandage you. It is the part of you that refuses to break yourself to keep others comfortable. It is the part of you that refuses to water relationships that never grow anything in return. Ruthlessness is the strength your softness needs to survive this world. It is the edge that keeps your heart intact. It is the shield that guards your compassion. It is the fire that prevents your empathy from becoming self-sacrifice. Softness is your gift. Ruthlessness is your armor. Without both, the world will break you. When you realize good intentions aren't enough, there comes a point in your life when you finally see the truth you've been avoiding since childhood. The truth that your intentions mean nothing to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You can love purely and still be taken advantage of. You can give wholeheartedly and still be unappreciated. You can show up consistently and still be abandoned the moment you stop serving someone's convenience. Good intentions do not protect you. They do not shield you. They do not guarantee kindness in return. In fact, the gentler your intentions, the more likely you are to attract people who sense they can twist those intentions for their own benefit. Awakened people realize this early. Your goodness doesn't determine how you're treated. Other people's wounds do. You think your sincerity matters. It matters to you, but not to everyone. Some people see your sincerity as a tool, a way in, a place to take more, a place to hide their selfishness behind your compassion. You tell yourself that if you love harder, if you explain yourself more clearly, if you forgive more generously, if you stay patient a little longer, people will eventually understand your heart. But they don't, because your good intentions have nothing to do with their worldview. They only see through the lens of their own pain, their own entitlement, their own fear, their own ego. And no amount of goodness can fix someone else's broken lens. The world teaches you this lesson brutally. You try to be honest with someone, and they attack your vulnerability. You try to support someone, and they expect you to do even more. You try to set a boundary, and they call you selfish. You try to communicate, and they accuse you of overreacting. You try to stay loyal, and they take your loyalty for granted. Good intentions don't protect you. They expose you. They show people exactly where your heart is accessible, where your empathy can be exploited, where your kindness can be manipulated. You begin to see that people don't respond to your intentions. They respond to your boundaries, or lack of them. This realization shifts something deep inside you, a quiet anger, a slow awakening, a recognition that the world does not reward purity of heart, but strength of character. And strength, you learn, does not come from being good. It comes from being self-protective. This is where the internal war begins. There is a part of you that wants to keep believing in goodness, that wants to trust the world, that wants to soften into love, that wants to remain open. But there is another part, the part that has been betrayed, disrespected, overlooked, exploited, that says, I cannot keep living like this. You feel the internal split between who you were trained to be and who you are becoming. You were taught to be agreeable, to be cooperative, to be forgiving. To be non-confrontational, to be easy to love, to be easy to handle, to be easy to blame. But awakening forces you to confront the truth. Agreeableness is not a virtue when it costs you your self-respect. Being easy to love should never mean being easy to hurt. You realize that goodness without strength is a recipe for destruction. People do not respect the endlessly kind. They consume them. At this stage of awakening, you begin to look back on your past relationships and see the pattern with painful clarity. Times you apologized when you weren't wrong. Times you lowered your needs to accommodate someone else's disrespect. Times you explained your feelings to people who were never listening. Times you suppressed your truth to keep someone else comfortable. Times you poured love into people who were emotionally bankrupt. You realize you weren't loved. You were used. Not always maliciously, sometimes unknowingly, but used nonetheless. Your good intentions became fuel for someone else's emotional laziness. You carried the relationship. You maintained the peace. You fixed every miscommunication. You absorbed every emotional blow. You held the responsibility for two people while they gave the bare minimum. Looking back, you see it clearly. You were trying to build a bridge to someone who had no intention of walking toward you. Good intentions cannot compensate for someone who chooses comfort over growth. And this is where the ruthlessness begins awakening. Not the ruthlessness of cruelty, but the ruthlessness of truth. The truth that not everyone deserves access to you. The truth that not everyone has earned your patience. The truth that not everyone should be forgiven repeatedly. The truth that not everyone belongs in your life just because they want to be in it. You begin to withdraw your energy from people who drain you, your attention from people who disrespect you, your compassion from people who never reciprocate, your time from people who misuse it, your love from people who can't hold it. This withdrawal is not bitterness. It is clarity. It is self-preservation. It is the birth of boundaries you never knew you were allowed to have. You start saying no without guilt. You start walking away without explaining. You start choosing yourself without apology. You start prioritizing your peace over someone else's chaos. This, finally, is when your intentions begin to evolve. Your intentions stop being soft and start being strategic. You no longer give blindly, you give consciously. You no longer trust instantly, you trust gradually. You no longer love recklessly, you love wisely. You no longer forgive endlessly. You forgive once, maybe twice, but never forever. You stop throwing your heart into places where it shatters. You stop handing your energy to people who never protect it. Your intentions stop being centered on others' comfort and start being centered on your own truth. This is ruthlessness in its purest form. The courage to prioritize your well-being over someone else's expectations. The world respects this energy. People treat you differently the moment you refuse to be a doormat, the moment you stop justifying yourself, the moment you stop accepting breadcrumbs as a meal, the moment you carry yourself like someone whose value is non-negotiable. Because when your intentions become aligned with strength, you stop attracting those who prey on weakness. You begin attracting those who respect boundaries, who reciprocate effort, who appreciate gentleness without exploiting it. Awakening doesn't require that you stop being good. It requires that you stop being unguarded. Softness remains your gift, but ruthlessness becomes your guardian. And once these two parts of you learn to coexist, you become someone the world can no longer break. The moment you stop explaining yourself. At some point on your path, something snaps inside you, quietly, cleanly, without drama. A shift so subtle you almost miss it, yet so powerful it marks the end of an old version of yourself. It happens in an ordinary moment, a conversation, a misunderstanding, a request you don't have the energy to fulfill, a comment that lands wrong, a demand that crosses a line. You open your mouth to justify yourself, to clarify your intentions, to soften the impact, to make someone else feel safer, the way you've always done. But the words don't come out. Something in you refuses. Something in you says, no more. You feel a boundary rise inside you like steel. Not loud, not aggressive, just firm, final, unshakable. And you realize, with startling clarity, that you are done explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. This is a defining moment in becoming ruthless. Not cruel, ruthlessly honest, ruthlessly self-protective, ruthlessly unwilling to abandon your truth just to make someone else feel comfortable. Before this moment, you lived inside a psychological trap, the need to justify your existence. You explained your feelings so people wouldn't think you were too much. You explained your boundaries so people wouldn't get offended. You explained your decisions so no one could accuse you of being selfish. You explained your silence so people wouldn't assume you were upset. You explained your needs as if they were burdens requiring permission. This habit was not weakness. It was survival. It was the coping mechanism of someone who learned early on that harmony was earned, that belonging required performance, that love came with conditions. You became responsible for other people's comfort, for their emotions, for their interpretations, for their insecurities, for their narratives about you. And somewhere along the way, you internalized the lie that you owed people explanations simply for being yourself. Awakening exposes this lie for what it is, a cage. And Section 3 is where you finally walk out of it. It begins with a strange realization. Most people don't listen to your explanations to understand you. They listen to defend their position, to validate their assumptions, to maintain control of the narrative, to keep you in the emotional role they assigned you long before you opened your mouth. You start to see it clearly. When someone wants to misunderstand you, explanations become fuel. They twist your words. They weaponize your vulnerability. They rewrite your truth into something that makes them comfortable. Explaining yourself only feeds their illusion, and awakening teaches you the ruthlessness to stop participating. Then something deeper happens. You start to feel the emotional cost of over-explaining, the exhaustion of carrying conversations that never lead to clarity, the frustration of defending feelings that should have been respected, the pain of begging for understanding from people incapable of giving it, the humiliation of talking yourself into being seen as human. You realize how many hours of your life have been spent trying to earn empathy from people who lacked it. You realize how much self-betrayal was wrapped inside the phrase, "Let me explain." And once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. Your explanations were not connection. They were self-abandonment. But the greatest transformation happens internally. You stop believing that your worth is negotiable. You stop believing that your truth requires permission. You stop believing that other people's perception is more important than your reality. You begin to trust your own inner world more than the distorted reflections people project onto you. This shift is subtle, a soft internal click, but it changes everything. You start saying things like, "I said what I said. I meant what I meant. My no is enough. My feeling is valid. My boundary is final. "I don't owe you more words." These statements don't come from anger. They come from strength. Real strength. Quiet strength. The kind of strength that emerges when you no longer fear losing people who never deserved your vulnerability in the first place. And here's the unexpected part. When you stop explaining yourself, certain people begin to disappear. Not because you pushed them away, but because your silence destroyed the power they once held over you. People who relied on your guilt can no longer manipulate you. People who relied on your overgiving can no longer drain you. People who relied on your emotional labor can no longer hide from their own work. People who relied on your apologies can no longer avoid accountability. Your silence becomes a mirror reflecting their truth, and many cannot handle their own reflection. Let them go. Your new life cannot begin until your old emotional contracts end. But something beautiful also happens. The people who are meant for you stop requiring explanations, understand you, without being spoon-fed your intentions. They respect your boundaries without needing a full presentation. They trust your decisions because they trust your character. They value your silence as much as your words. These are the people your awakening is clearing space for. People who meet you where you are, not where your trauma taught you to stand. This stage of ruthlessness is transformative because it gives you back something you didn't know you had lost: your emotional sovereignty. The right to exist without justification. The right to feel without permission. The right to speak without apology. The right to walk away without guilt. The right to choose yourself without explanation. Once you taste that freedom, you never go back. Your energy changes. Your posture shifts. Your presence sharpens. Your aura becomes unmistakable. People sense the difference. They feel the boundary even before you speak it. You've become someone who protects their inner world with clarity, not excuses. This is ruthlessness woven with self-respect. This is strength born from softness. This is the moment you stop bleeding your truth for people who refuse to understand it. This is where your old self dies and your new self begins. When you finally trust your inner wolf. Biases are a version of you that you've spent most of your life suppressing. A version you were taught to fear, to silence, to keep buried under kindness, patience, politeness, and the need to be liked. It is the version of you that senses danger before logic does. The version that knows when someone is lying, when something is off, when an environment is wrong, when your boundaries are being crossed, long before you can articulate why. It is the ancient part of you, the instinctual self, the inner wolf. For most of your life, you've been trained to ignore it, to tame it, to behave, to choose diplomacy over truth, to choose harmony over instinct, to choose self-sacrifice over self-protection. But awakening forces you to meet this wolf again. And the moment you stop fearing it, you begin to trust it, and everything changes. Because the wolf in you has always seen what your soft heart was too generous to acknowledge. The wolf notices patterns your mind rationalizes away. The shift in someone's tone, the micro-expression of annoyance, the sudden emotional distance, the hidden jealousy behind a compliment, the subtle disrespect in a joke, the manipulative softness in an apology, the performative affection used to pacify your intuition. Your wolf catches it instantly. But for years, you dismissed it. You gave people the benefit of the doubt. You chose understanding over intuition. You chose hope over evidence. You chose softness over the discomfort of truth. That is how you got hurt. Your wolf wasn't wrong. You just weren't ready to listen. This is the turning point in becoming ruthless. When your inner wolf, the part of you that sees without illusion, becomes the authority in your life. You stop asking, "Am I overreacting?" and start asking, "What is my intuition trying to tell me?" You stop silencing the discomfort and start interpreting it. You stop giving endless chances and start paying attention to the first red flag. You stop hoping for potential and start acting on patterns. Your wolf is not emotional. It is not dramatic. It is not insecure. It is observant, neutral, unbiased, sharp. It sees reality exactly as it is. And once you awaken, you begin making decisions from that clarity. This shift feels strange at first. You start walking away from conversations that drain you without explaining why. You start declining invitations from people who once had access to your energy. You start cutting ties with those who consistently betray your trust, not in explosions, but in quiet, final exits. You say no with a tone that needs no justification. You enforce boundaries before your emotions collapse. You remove yourself the moment something feels wrong, not after the damage is done. You stop negotiating with people who violate your intuition. This is the wolf leading. Not violently, not recklessly, but with unwavering certainty. As your inner wolf awakens, you begin to see how much danger your softness once attracted. Not physical danger, emotional danger, energetic danger, psychological danger. People sensed your empathy and used it. People sensed your patience and stretched it. People sensed your need to be understood and manipulated it. People sensed your fear of conflict and exploited it. Your wolf sees these dynamics clearly and protects you before you even realize what's happening. You stop tolerating vague behavior. You stop ignoring inconsistencies. You stop accepting half-hearted effort. You stop allowing anyone to rewrite your reality for you. You become impossible to manipulate because your wolf detects everything beneath the surface. This is not paranoia. It is awakened perception. And here is the part that changes your life forever. The inner wolf does not negotiate with those who harm your soul. It walks away, calmly, quietly, completely. No drama, no resentment, no emotional bargaining, just departure. The wolf understands what your human heart struggles with. Some people do not deserve continued access to you. Some people cannot meet you at your level of depth. Some people do not have the capacity for the loyalty you offer. Some people are threatened by your strength. Some people only value you when you are easy to control. And once the wolf sees this, it does not unsee it. Your human heart may hesitate. Your emotions may ache. Your memories may try to pull you back. But the wolf in you drives your feet forward. It knows the cost of staying far too well. But here is the deepest truth of this awakening. Your inner wolf was never meant to replace your softness. It was meant to protect it. Your heart is still tender. Your empathy is still real. Your compassion still flows. Your openness still matters. You are not becoming heartless. You are becoming whole. A soft heart guided by a wise mind, protected by a ruthless intuition. Before awakening, you lived with only your heart. After awakening, your heart and your wolf walk together. Softness without the wolf made you easy to break. The wolf without softness would make you cold. But the two together, that is an unstoppable force. A person who can love deeply and walk away decisively. A person who can forgive easily but trust slowly. A person who can understand others without abandoning themselves. A person who can empathize without being consumed. This balance is the foundation of healthy ruthlessness. It is what the world respects. It is what manipulators fear. It is what soft souls need to survive. And once you taste this power, once you feel your wolf rise to meet your heart, you understand something profound. You were never meant to be harmless. You were meant to be powerful and choose not to harm. That is true strength. That is awakened ruthlessness. When you finally stop begging for reciprocity, there comes a day, not marked on any calendar, not announced by any dramatic event, when you simply stop reaching your hand into places that never reach back. It isn't anger. It isn't bitterness. It isn't disappointment. It's clarity. A cold, clean clarity that settles in your bones after years of giving more than you received, listening more than you were heard, showing up more than others ever did for you. It's the day you wake up and feel something inside you say, with a voice calm enough to be terrifying, "I'm done." Done pouring love into hands that stay closed. Done offering understanding to people who refuse to understand you. Done investing energy where the emotional return is zero. Done begging, silently, subtly, unconsciously, for reciprocity that never arrives. This moment is the death of your old patterns and the birth of your ruthless self-respect. Before this shift, you used to believe that love was proven through endurance, that relationships required self-sacrifice, that loyalty meant staying no matter how empty you felt, that patience would eventually be rewarded if you just kept giving, kept trying, kept showing how much you cared. You believed that your effort would inspire others to rise. You believed your devotion would soften their walls. You believed your consistency would awaken theirs. It didn't. Instead, the more you gave, the less they valued it. The more you tried, the more they expected. The more you expressed, the less they listened. Your love became background noise. Your loyalty became assumed. Your presence became convenience. And the most painful realization was not that they didn't care, but that they never had to, because you cared enough for both of you. This is the psychological trap soft-hearted people fall into. The belief that love can be taught through example. You tried to demonstrate how to love you by loving them deeply. You tried to teach them how to treat you by giving them the best parts of you. You tried to model emotional maturity by swallowing your hurts and continuing to show up. But people don't learn love by receiving it. They learn love by being willing to give it. And if they're not willing, nothing you do can change the equation. Once you awaken, you see this truth clearly. It hits like a revelation, not loud, but unavoidable. You cannot create reciprocity in someone who is comfortable taking. Your giving spirit was never the problem. Your audience was. This is when the internal breaking point arrives. Quiet, steady, irreversible. You lose the appetite for one-sided effort. It no longer feels noble. It feels foolish. It feels heavy. It feels wrong in your body. Your soul begins rejecting relationships that drain you, not with anger, but with indifference. A gentle numbness that signals the end. You stop initiating conversations. You stop filling silence with explanation. You stop checking in with people who never check on you. You stop giving chances to people who misuse them. You stop overextending to maintain connections that would collapse without your support. This isn't spite. It is healing. you begin to understand a brutal truth about human nature. People don't treasure what's abundant. They treasure what's rare. You were abundant. Your love, your time, your effort. You offered them freely and consistently. You thought that made you good. It actually made you invisible. People who lack emotional maturity cannot value what they didn't earn. They grow entitled to your energy. They assume it will always be there. They assume you will always bend. They assume you will always forgive. They assume you will never leave. Because you never did. Until now. Ruthlessness enters when you finally see the cost of your unreciprocated giving. You see the exhaustion you mistook for loyalty. You see the resentment growing in your chest that you ignored for the sake of peace. You see the emotional self-neglect you disguised as unconditional love. You see the way you were pouring life into people who drained you casually. And you finally ask the question your old self was too scared to ask. What would my life look like if I only gave energy to people who gave it back? The moment you ask it, everything inside you changes. You stop romanticizing struggle. You stop praising your ability to tolerate pain. You stop wearing emotional labor as a badge of honor. You stop believing that unconditional love means accepting unacceptable behavior. You become selective, not in a cold way, but in a wise way. Your heart doesn't close, it becomes guarded. Your love doesn't shrink, it becomes precise. Your effort doesn't disappear, it becomes intentional. And this is where your power begins. Because the love you used to beg for begins to move towards you once you stop tolerating its absence. People who once took you for granted feel the shift in your energy. They sense the distance. They sense the silence. They sense the loss of access they once had without earning it. Some will chase you. Some will panic. Some will suddenly understand what you meant the whole time. Some will apologize only because they fear losing you completely. Some will realize too late that you were the rarest thing they ever had. But here's the secret. Your new self will not be moved by their sudden awareness. Why? Because once you taste reciprocity from life, from yourself, from aligned relationships, your soul refuses to return to scarcity. You see the truth your old self couldn't face. Anyone who forces you to beg for what should be natural does not belong in your life. And here's the most powerful part of all. You stop begging because you stop seeking love from the wrong places. You begin giving yourself what others withheld. You validate yourself. You respect your boundaries. You choose your own peace. You honor your intuition. You protect your emotional energy. Your love stops leaking outward and starts circulating inward. This self-sufficiency does not make you cold. It makes you discerning. It makes your love exclusive, intentional, protected. And once your love becomes protected, only the worthy can access it. This is not arrogance. This is evolution. Ruthlessness is simply the refusal to keep betraying yourself in the name of compassion. And when you stop betraying yourself, the world stops breaking you. When you start moving through life without asking permission, there comes a shift, quiet but seismic, when you stop waiting for someone to agree with you before you make a move. You stop looking around to see who approves, who supports, who validates, who claps, who stands behind you. You simply act. It feels unnatural at first, almost rebellious, almost dangerous. Because for most of your life, you were trained to seek permission before taking up space. Permission to speak, permission to disagree, permission to rest, permission to feel, permission to want more, permission to change, permission to leave, permission to choose yourself. But awakening breaks this conditioning. It shatters the psychological cage that kept you small, silent, waiting. And you step into a version of yourself that doesn't ask for a green light. You become it. This is the birth of ruthless autonomy. Before this shift, you lived with invisible chains. You worried constantly about what others would think. You dreaded disappointing people. You softened your desires so you wouldn't seem demanding. You muted your opinions to avoid conflict. You watered down your personality to remain likable. You stayed in situations you had outgrown years ago because walking away might upset someone. Your loyalty was a prison. Your empathy was a leash. Your self-doubt was the cage door locked from the inside. People learned to expect your compliance. They learned you would bend, adjust, accommodate, sacrifice, apologize, even when you weren't wrong. You were predictable, safe, easy to manage. Awakening ends this chapter abruptly, not because you choose rebellion, but because your soul refuses to live in a body that no longer belongs to itself. You begin to notice how often you paused your life to avoid upsetting someone else, how you asked for opinions you didn't need, how you doubted your intuition even when it was right, how you waited for a sign that never came, how you gave others veto power over your own path. This realization is painful, humbling, embarrassing even, but it's also the spark that ignites your transformation. You see clearly. Every time you asked for permission, you handed your power away. Every time you hesitated, someone else decided for you. Every time you stepped back, someone else stepped forward into the space meant for you. Your life became a reflection of your fear of taking full ownership. And once you realize this, a fire awakens inside you. The fire of reclaiming authority over your existence. The change begins subtly. You start saying no without softening it. You start declining invitations that drain you. You make choices based on your truth, not other people's expectations. You speak with clarity instead of cushioning every sentence. You stop waiting for someone to understand your decision before making it. People feel the shift immediately. They notice the lack of apology. They notice the new tone in your voice. They notice the quiet finality in your boundaries. They notice that you no longer explain or justify or defend. Some will be threatened. Some will be confused. Some will accuse you of changing. Some will try to guilt or shame you back into your old compliance. But your awakening has already rewritten the script. You are not the person who asked before acting. You are not the person who shrank to fit. You are not the person who needed reassurance to trust your own mind. You are becoming someone who moves, someone who decides, someone who acts, someone who trusts themselves even when no one else understands. Here is the most profound shift in this stage of ruthlessness. You begin to realize that no one actually had authority over you in the first place. You were obeying ghosts. Ghosts of childhood conditioning, ghosts of old insecurities, ghosts of societal norms, ghosts of outdated beliefs, ghosts of imagined consequences. You weren't imprisoned by others. You were imprisoned by the fear of disappointing them. But the awakened self doesn't fear disappointment. It fears self-betrayal. You begin to ask new questions. What do I want? What feels true to me? What direction does my intuition point? What choice honors my growth? What version of myself am I becoming? And you follow those answers without seeking validation. This is power. Pure, unfiltered power. Not over others, over yourself. This shift doesn't make you selfish. It makes you sovereign. You don't become careless. You become careful with whom you allow to influence you. You don't become reckless. You become precise with where you invest your time. You don't become arrogant. You become rooted in your own knowing. And something magical happens when you start moving without permission. Your life realigns. Opportunities appear that were invisible before. Relationships evolve or fall away. Paths open that you didn't have access to when you were living in fear. When you no longer wait for approval, your choices become authentic. When your choices become authentic, your reality matches your soul. This is why awakening feels like the world rearranges around you. Because it does. The external world responds differently when you carry yourself as someone unwilling to negotiate their existence. But here's the part that changes everything. Once you stop asking for permission, you become untouchable. Manipulators lose leverage because you no longer fear their reaction. People pleasers can't control you because you no longer need their acceptance. Authority figures lose power because you see your own autonomy. Toxic partners lose influence because you no longer depend on their approval. Old emotional ties lose their grip because you finally know your life belongs to you. You become someone who cannot be swayed by fear, guilt, pressure, or shame. Your mind becomes your own. Your choices become your own. Your path becomes your own. And in this newfound independence, you stop surviving. You start living. Not cautiously, not quietly, not apologetically, but deliberately. Your awakened ruthlessness is not coldness, it is self-direction. It is the refusal to hand the pen of your life to anyone else ever again. The day you become unbreakable. Exacerbated from your transformation, and it doesn't arrive with fireworks or a dramatic spiritual revelation. It comes quietly, so quietly you almost miss it. It comes in the way your voice no longer shakes when you speak the truth. It comes in the way your hands stay steady when someone tries to provoke you. It comes in the way your heart remains calm in situations that once terrified you. It comes in the way you walk away from the very things you used to chase. This stage is simple. You become unbreakable. Not because life stops testing you, but because you stop collapsing under those tests. Before this stage, the world could shatter you with rejection, with disappointment, with misunderstanding, with abandonment, with betrayal, with the fear of being alone. But now, something inside you has shifted. Your worth is no longer external. Your peace is no longer negotiable. Your identity is no longer fragile. Your heart is no longer unguarded. You no longer crumble under the weight of other people's opinions because your value no longer depends on how they perceive you. You no longer shrink in the face of disapproval because you no longer require validation to make decisions that honor your soul. Life can still hit you, and it will, but it cannot destroy you, because the parts of you that were soft, confused, and dependent have died, and the parts that remain are fortified. Becoming unbreakable isn't about building walls around yourself. It's about building a foundation so strong that the world cannot shake it. You stop outsourcing your emotional stability to unpredictable people. You stop placing your self-worth in hands unsteady and undeserving. You stop relying on circumstances to determine whether you feel grounded. Your stability becomes internal, anchored in your clarity, your boundaries, your intuition, your sense of purpose. The world can shift, but you do not sway. The world can test you, but you don't lose yourself. The world can try to pull you back into old patterns, and you simply don't move. This is the moment you realize you are no longer living reactively. You are living intentionally. The unbreakable version of you responds to life differently. Where you once apologized for taking up space, you now walk with presence. Where you once chased closure, you now give it to yourself. Where you once begged for honesty, you now trust patterns over promises. Where you once feared endings, you now initiate them when something no longer aligns. Your decisions are not emotional impulses. They are calm, measured, self-respecting. You do not shout to be heard. Your silence speaks for you. You do not demand loyalty. Those unworthy of it simply fall away. You do not try to fix people. Life will teach them what your love could not. And most importantly, you do not break when someone walks away. You recognize it as direction, not loss. This is the stage where your inner wolf, your boundaries, your discernment, and your self-respect finally fuse into one unified force. People around you start reacting differently too. Some become intimidated because they can no longer control you with guilt or fear. Some become distant because your clarity exposes their inconsistency. Some become resentful because your evolution forces them to confront their stagnation. Some become deeply attracted, not romantically, but energetically, because your presence now radiates strength, direction, awareness. People who were once comfortable taking advantage of you now struggle to approach you. People who relied on your passiveness now feel the weight of your boundaries. People who stayed in your life because of your emotional labor suddenly disappear once the labor stops. Let them go. Your new life requires a different circle. People who respect your strength, not exploit your softness. And here's the paradox of becoming unbreakable. The stronger you become, the softer your heart grows, but only for the right people. Your empathy becomes precise, not wasted. Your love becomes deep, not drained. Your presence becomes valuable, not taken for granted. Your time becomes sacred, not freely exploited. You are unbreakable, not because your heart has hardened, but because your discernment has sharpened. You now know where to pour your soul and where to withhold it. You now know who deserves the most tender parts of you and who cannot be trusted with even your silence. This is emotional maturity. This is psychological strength. This is spiritual evolution. At this stage, the world cannot pull you back into your old versions. You do not chase. You do not beg. You do not prove. You do not shrink. You do not apologize for who you are becoming. Instead, you move with purpose. You make decisions with intention. You protect your peace ruthlessly. You choose your circle wisely. You allow life to unfold without forcing outcomes. You no longer fear loss because you trust yourself to survive it. And this is the moment you finally understand what life was trying to teach you through every painful experience. You were meant to evolve into someone you could rely on. Someone grounded, someone self-led, someone emotionally sovereign. Someone who bends but never breaks. Someone who knows their worth without needing reminders. Someone who can walk alone without feeling lonely. Someone who is soft by choice and strong by nature. Someone who is unbreakable because they have reclaimed every piece of themselves that was lost along the way. The rise of the untouchable self. Your transformation does not end with strength. It does not end with boundaries. It does not end with walking away or trusting your intuition or reclaiming your voice. Those are stepping stones, powerful ones, but they are not the destination. The true transformation happens in the quiet space after the storm, when the noise settles, when the old versions of you stop screaming for your attention, when the world seems strangely still, not because something external changed, but because you did. This is the stage where you become someone who cannot be shaken by the world, because you are finally aligned with your own soul. This is where everything, every wound, every mistake, every heartbreak, every betrayal, every awakening comes together to form a version of you that you've never met before. A version of you that no longer needs external confirmation to feel whole. A version of you that moves through life with an inner certainty that cannot be taught or borrowed or performed. A version of you that feels like home. You begin to notice the shift in small, subtle ways. Someone tries to provoke you, and you don't rise to it. Their chaos no longer pulls you in. You see it for what it is, a storm that isn't yours to enter. Someone tries to manipulate you, and you see the strings immediately. You don't explain, you don't react, you simply step out of their reach. Someone tries to guilt trip you, and it doesn't land. Your self-worth is no longer tied to pleasing anyone. Someone tries to test your boundaries, and instead of justifying your no, you hold it calmly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Because it now is. This is the energy of the untouchable self. Not cold, not indifferent, not unreachable. Just sovereign. You belong to yourself in a way you never have before. This stage feels both exhilarating and unsettling. You look back at your old self, the one who tolerated too much, apologized too quickly, explained too often, loved too hard, waited too long. And you feel compassion, not shame. That old self was trying to survive, trying to connect, trying to earn safety in whatever way they understood at the time. You don't hate them, you thank them. Because without them, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't have grown. You wouldn't have awakened. You wouldn't have risen. The old self walked you to the edges of your breaking point, and the new self stepped forward from the ashes. This is rebirth. Not poetic rebirth, actual psychological resurrection. You have become someone your past self would barely recognize, but deeply admire. Yet the most powerful change is internal and invisible. You no longer break when things end. You no longer spiral when life shifts. You no longer collapse when people disappoint you. You no longer cling when something starts slipping away. You trust the flow because you trust yourself. Everything becomes easier when you stop fearing loss. You understand now that losing what isn't meant for you is not punishment, it is protection. So you release more quickly. You surrender more gently. You detach more naturally. You love deeply, but you don't grip. You care sincerely, but you don't chase. You connect openly, but you don't merge. You give freely, but you don't drain yourself. This is emotional maturity. This is spiritual evolution. This is psychological strength. This is you finally becoming the kind of person who can face life directly without dissolving under its pressure. And with this clarity comes something else, a new relationship with solitude. In your old life, solitude felt like punishment. Silence felt like abandonment. Being alone felt like failure. Now, solitude feels like oxygen. Silence feels like alignment. Being alone feels like returning home. You no longer search for people to fill your emptiness because the emptiness is gone. You no longer beg for reassurance because you reassure yourself. You no longer wait for someone to give you purpose because you create it internally. Your solitude is not loneliness. It is empowerment. It is recalibration. It is where your truth lives, untouched by outside expectations. This is what makes you unbreakable. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of self. The people who meet you now meet a different soul. They meet someone who listens with depth, not desperation. Someone who loves with intention, not insecurity. Someone who speaks with clarity, not fear. Someone who chooses with self-awareness, not people-pleasing. Your energy once attracted users. Now it attracts equals. Your boundaries once felt harsh. Now they feel natural. Your self-respect once felt uncomfortable. Now it feels like oxygen. Your truth once scared you. Now it guides you. Your instincts once seemed dangerous. Now they protect you. You have become the person your younger self needed, your older self can trust, and your future self will be proud of. This is the point in your journey where you finally understand what all the pain was preparing you for. You were never meant to remain small. You were never meant to live silently. You were never meant to bend endlessly until you disappeared. You were meant to break open, to awaken, to rise, to reclaim, to transform, to become. Not perfect, not hardened, not invincible. Just awake. Awake enough to choose yourself in every room. Awake enough to walk away from what harms you. Awake enough to trust your intuition over the world's noise. Awake enough to love without losing yourself. Awake enough to know that your soul is your compass. And now? Now you step into the world not as the wounded version you once were, but as the whole version you fought to become. A version the world can no longer break. A version you no longer abandon. A version aligned with truth, depth, strength, and ruthless self-respect. So, here is the final question. The one that determines everything that comes next for you. Now that you've awakened, who will you refuse to be ever again?